Did you know that the all-natural pesticide you might be using can harm your plants, beneficial insects, and even the environment? Stick around to uncover the surprising truths about neem oil that every gardener needs to know. Hey there, garden gurus. Welcome back to the Don't Do This Guide, your go-to channel for debunking myths and setting the record straight on all things DIY. Today, we're digging into neem oil, a staple in organic gardening touted as the ultimate natural pesticide. But is neem oil really the harmless miracle solution it's cracked up to be? Let's get our hands dirty and find out. Okay, first things first. While neem oil is derived from a natural source, that doesn't automatically make it 100% safe for every plant in your garden. It's kind of like saying, well, lemon juice is natural, so I can just pour it all over my prize-winning roses. You see, neem oil contains compounds called limonoids, and these are the things that give neem its pest-fighting properties. But here's the catch. Limonoids can also be phytotoxic, meaning they can be toxic to plants, especially when used incorrectly. Think of it like this. You wouldn't take a mega dose of aspirin when you have a headache, right? You'd follow the recommended dosage. It's the same with neem oil. Overdoing it, especially on sensitive plants, can lead to something called phytotoxicity. Now, phytotoxicity can manifest in a few different ways. You might start to see leaf burn, where the leaves develop brown or scorched patches, or the leaves might start to curl, wilt, or even drop off entirely. In severe cases, it can even stunt the growth of your plants. So what makes some plants more susceptible to neem oil damage than others? Well, young seedlings, for example, are particularly vulnerable because their leaves are still developing and haven't built up the same resilience as mature plants. Also, certain plant species are just naturally more sensitive to neem oil. For instance, some types of ferns, orchids, and even certain varieties of tomatoes and peppers have been known to react poorly to neem oil. The takeaway here is this. Don't assume that just because it's natural, it's a free-for-all. Always, always, always do a patch test on a small, inconspicuous area of your plant before you go spraying your entire garden. Observe it for at least 24 hours to see if there are any adverse reactions. Here's another misconception we need to clear up. Neem oil is often marketed as being harmless to beneficial insects, and while that's partially true, it's not the whole story. It's like saying a gentle breeze won't affect a butterfly. Sure, it might not blow it away, but it can still disrupt its flight. You see, neem oil works as a pesticide in a couple of ways. First, it acts as an insect growth regulator, meaning it messes with the hormones of certain insects, preventing them from molting or laying eggs. Second, it acts as an anti-feedant, making plants taste so unpleasant that insects would rather starve than take a bite. Now, here's where things get tricky. Neem oil is most effective against soft-bodied insects like aphids, whiteflies, and spider mites. These guys are generally considered pests, and we're usually not too sad to see them go. However, neem oil doesn't discriminate between good bugs and bad bugs. It can also harm beneficial insects like ladybugs, lacewings, and even pollinators like bees, especially if they come into direct contact with a freshly sprayed plant. Think about it. A ladybug munching on aphids covered in neem oil is going to ingest that oil, and that can disrupt its life cycle just as much as it disrupts the aphids. Now, I'm not saying you should banish neem oil from your garden entirely. The key is to be mindful of how and when you use it. For instance, avoid spraying neem oil directly on flowers in bloom, as that's where pollinators are most likely to be. Let's talk about safety for a minute. Because neem oil is derived from a natural source, there's this misconception that it's completely harmless to humans and pets. And while it's true that neem oil is generally considered to be less toxic than many synthetic pesticides, it's not entirely benign. Remember those limonoids we talked about earlier? Well, they can cause skin irritation in some people, especially those with sensitive skin. So, if you're prone to eczema or contact dermatitis, it's best to wear gloves when handling neem oil. And it's not just skin irritation you need to be aware of. Ingesting large amounts of neem oil can cause nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Now, I know what you're thinking. Adam, I'm not planning on drinking this stuff. But you have to think about your pets and kids. Curious puppies and toddlers, for example, might be tempted to take a lick of a freshly sprayed plant. And let's be honest, sometimes our gardening gloves end up on the ground, right next to where our furry friends like to play. So, what's the takeaway here? Store your neem oil out of reach of children and pets, just like you would with any other household chemical. And when you're spraying, be mindful of where you're spraying. Avoid spraying near pet food and water bowls, and keep your pets inside while you're spraying and for a few hours afterward to allow the spray to dry completely. Neem oil is effective against all pests and diseases. Look, I get it. We all want that magic bullet, that one solution that will solve all our gardening woes. But the truth is, neem oil isn't a miracle cure. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and it's definitely not going to eliminate every single pest and disease from your garden. Remember how we talked about neem oil working against soft-bodied insects? Well, it's not as effective against insects with hard exoskeletons like beetles or squash bugs. Think of it like trying to pierce a knight's armor with a toothpick. It's just not going to happen. And when it comes to diseases, neem oil is more of a preventative measure than a cure. It can help to prevent fungal diseases like powdery mildew and black spot by coating the leaves and making it difficult for the fungal spores to take hold. But once a plant is already infected with a disease, neem oil isn't going to magically make it disappear. It's like trying to put out a house fire with a water pistol. You need something a little more powerful. So, what's the lesson here? Don't rely solely on neem oil to solve all your pest and disease problems. It's just one tool in your gardening arsenal. You need to use it in conjunction with other methods like crop rotation, companion planting, and attracting beneficial insects to your garden. Okay, let's talk about the bigger picture for a second, the environment. Because even though neem oil is derived from a natural source, that doesn't mean it's completely harmless to the environment, especially when it's overused. You see, when neem oil is sprayed on plants, it doesn't just magically disappear. It can end up in the soil and water, and if it's not used responsibly, it can have unintended consequences. For example, neem oil can disrupt the delicate balance of microorganisms in the soil. These microorganisms are essential for healthy plant growth, and when they're thrown out of whack, it can affect the overall health of your garden. And it's not just the soil we need to be concerned about. Neem oil can also run off into waterways, especially if it's applied heavily or just before a rainstorm. And when it reaches rivers and lakes, it can be toxic to aquatic life, like fish and amphibians. So, what's the takeaway here? Use neem oil sparingly and responsibly. Don't treat it like a free pass to douse your entire garden every week. Remember, a little goes a long way, and when it comes to the environment, less is always more. Alright, so we've talked about the potential downsides of neem oil, but don't despair. There are plenty of other ways to keep your garden healthy and pest-free without relying solely on this one product. First and foremost, let's talk about prevention. A healthy garden is a naturally more resistant garden, so make sure you're providing your plants with the right amount of sunlight, water, and nutrients. Healthy soil is also key, so amend your soil with compost and other organic matter to create a thriving environment for your plants. Next up, let's talk about natural pest control methods. One of my favorites is attracting beneficial insects to your garden. These are the good guys, the predators that will help keep the pest population in check. You can attract them by planting a diverse range of flowering plants that provide them with food and shelter. Another great option is using insecticidal soap. This is a safe and effective way to control soft-bodied insects like aphids and spider mites. You can find it at most garden centers, or you can even make your own at home with just a few simple ingredients. And finally, don't underestimate the power of good old-fashioned hand-picking. If you see a few pests on your plants, don't be afraid to squish them or knock them off into a bucket of soapy water. It might seem tedious, but it's a very effective way to control pest populations before they get out of hand. The bottom line on neem oil. At the end of the day, neem oil isn't the silver bullet it's often made out to be. It's a tool, a potentially helpful one, but like any tool, it must be used correctly and responsibly. Remember, over-application can harm your plants. It can affect beneficial insects. It's not entirely non-toxic to humans and pets, and it doesn't solve every pest or disease issue. Did this video help you see neem oil in a new light? If you learned something new today, give this video a thumbs up and share it with your fellow gardeners. And don't forget to subscribe to the Don't Do This guide for more myth-busting tips and tricks. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. Thanks for joining us on this journey to a healthier, happier garden. Remember, sometimes the best solutions are about balance and knowledge, not just quick fixes. See you next time.